Have you ever needed to ask a really busy friend for a favor? Or maybe you had to disagree with someone, but, gently, without causing offense.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
You probably find yourself choosing your words pretty carefully, right?
Hmm.
Maybe adding a, do you think you could possibly, or an, I'm so sorry to bother you, but.
Exactly, that careful phrasing.
So why do we do that? Why is that kind of indirect way of talking so important, especially maybe across different cultures?
Well, it's a great question, and it really gets right to the heart of what linguists call pragmatics.
Pragmatics, okay.
Yeah, basically language and action, it's not just the dictionary meaning like what words mean on paper, it's how we use them, how we use language to get things done, but also be, mindful of the social situation.
Yeah.
And politeness, that's a huge piece of that puzzle.
Right. And today, we're actually going to do a deep dive into politeness, looking through a very specific lens. We're looking at how it's introduced to young English language learners over in Indonesia.
Interesting context.
Yeah, we've got this study here that really zeroed in on an English textbook. It's used by 8th graders there, a book called English for Nusantara.
That's right. And the researchers, they weren't just like reading the stories, they were analyzing the conversations inside the book, almost like detectives. Their mission was to find specific examples of what we call negative politeness strategies.
Okay, so that's our mission today, too, then. We're going to unpack what negative politeness actually means. And don't worry, it's not about being rude or negative.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
We'll look at why it's such a key concept in communication, what these researchers found, like specifically in the pages of this Indonesian textbook. And, what does that tell us about how language education kind of bridges theory, culture, and practical communication skills?
Yeah, because textbooks like this, English for Nusantara, they're more than just lists of vocabulary, right? They're really powerful tools. They introduce students not just to English, but also to ways of interacting in English.
Well,
So analyzing what's inside gives us this window into the specific ways of communicating that are being taught. And that's really important in schools where kids are learning how to, navigate social stuff respectfully.
so the textbook is kind of like a mini guidebook for how to behave with words.
You could say that, yeah.
And this study looked at politeness because, well, like you said, it helps students communicate respectfully, avoid stepping on people's toes. That helps build relationships.
Absolutely. It's all about using language in ways that minimize sort of potential imposition
Yeah.
or maybe a threat to someone's sense of self, their social standing.
Imposition.
Like, think about it. Just demanding something is super different from making a polite request, isn't it?
Totally different vibe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The polite request acknowledges the other person's autonomy, their independence, and this focus on respecting the listener's space or their freedom not to be bothered, that's the core idea behind what researchers call negative politeness. Ah, okay. So, negative here doesn't mean bad politeness. It means focusing on the listener's negative face, their desire not to be imposed upon, not to be controlled.
Precisely.
It's about creating a little social distance, maybe?
Yeah.
Or showing restraint, rather than trying to get closer, which I guess would be positive politeness.
You've got it. Exactly.
Yeah.
And politeness theory, people like Brown and Levinson, they break these ideas down into all sorts of specific strategies. But the main point is negative politeness is about being indirect, showing respect, maybe apologizing sometimes, or hedging your requests so they don't sound like demands.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So armed with that understanding, the researchers dove into the conversations in this English for Nusantara textbook. For 8th graders, they went through like every page, every dialogue.
Yep, that was the methodology.
But what did they find? Did the textbook teach students, all the different theoretical ways to be negatively polite? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Because out of the whole range of negative politeness strategies that linguists have identified in theory, this study found that only 3 were actually showing up consistently in the textbook conversations.
Only 3. Seriously, that's quite striking.
It is.
Which specific strategies made the cut? Which ones were being taught to these Indonesian students?
Okay, so they found examples of questioning and hedging, apologizing, and giving deference. And when they counted them up across the whole book, they found a total of 14 instances of just these 3.
14 total examples. Okay. And the breakdown.
Yeah, the breakdown was fascinating. Giving deference was way out in front. The most common, it appeared 9 times.
9 times for giving deference. Wow.
Then questioning and hedging showed up 3 times and apologizing just 2 times.
Wow. Okay, so really strong emphasis on giving deference. Let's maybe look at some examples from the textbook itself for each of these. How does questioning and hedging look in practice? What's an example?
Right. So questioning and hedging is basically about softening things, softening requests or statements. Often you do it by phrasing them as questions or using words that show a bit of uncertainty or, politeness.
Like,
Well, one example from the study is when a student asks another, can we listen to it together?
ah, okay. That's definitely softer than saying, let's listen to it together, or we will listen now. It gives the other person room to say no or suggest something else.
Precisely. It respects their space. Another example they pulled was from a retelling of the Ugly Duckling story, actually.
Okay.
The Ugly Duckling asks, a chicken or a cow, I think it was, can I please stay here?
Okay.
Adding that can I please is a really clear hedge. It softens the request a lot and respects that the answer might be no. It avoids sounding demanding.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. Reducing the directness. Got it. Now, let's move to the one they found most often. Giving deference. This sounds like showing respect, obviously, but how is it a negative politeness strategy? How does it respect the other person's space?
That's a good question. Giving deference often involves using respectful language or titles, especially when you're talking to someone maybe in a higher social position or someone older.
Right.
The study highlights how this usually happens through specific ways of addressing people, address forms. By using a title or formal term, you're acknowledging their status. And implicitly, you're showing you understand the social distance or the hierarchy. You're not just assuming closeness or equality.
Wow.
So it's a way of showing respect for their position, which in turn respects their autonomy within that structure. It maintains that appropriate distance.
Like using titles like sir or ma'am or maybe Mr. Smith instead of just John, or in this context.
Exactly. Or in the textbook examples, they found conversations within a family setting. A father asking, how's your school, son? And the child replying, it was good, Dad.
Okay, using son and dad.
Or a son asking, Dad, please tell me more. These forms of address, son, dad, they clearly show that relationship and the inherent respect.
And didn't the ugly duckling use this too?
Yes. Mom, they don't want to play with me. Addressing the mother duck as mom. But crucially, the study also points out examples from school or when talking to older siblings, things really relevant for 8th graders.
Right, real-life situations for them.
You see students addressing their teacher with yes. Now, bud is a respectful Indonesian term for addressing older women or female teachers.
Ah, okay. A specific cultural marker there.
Definitely. Or a younger sister calling her older brother kak galang, where kak is an honorific, like a title used for older sibling.
Like Big Brother Galang.
Sort of, yeah. It signifies that older sibling status.
Right.
And also just simple things like, Mom, what's the name of the river? Or Daddy, I want. Even these direct address forms reinforce that family structure and respect.
So that heavy focus on giving deference, using titles like dad, mom, but, kak, it really feels like the textbook is strongly emphasizing respect for hierarchical relationships, family school authorities.
That's exactly the key insight here, I think. The dominance of giving deference in this textbook points directly to the cultural context.
The Indonesian context.
Right. In many Asian cultures, including Indonesia, respect for elders and authority figures is, well, it's paramount. It's hugely important. And using the right address forms is a fundamental way to express that respect and just maintain social harmony, keep things running smoothly.
So the textbook isn't just teaching English words like dad or mom.
No, it's actively teaching students how to navigate Indonesian social structures using the English language. And it's prioritizing deference as a core politeness skill in that context.
Wow. That's a really powerful connection.
Oh,
The language teaching itself is reinforcing cultural values.
it seems to be, yeah.
Okay, so we have softening requests with hedging and showing respect through these specific address forms. What about the third strategy they found? Apologizing. That seems more straightforward, maybe.
Well, yes and no. Apologizing is obviously crucial for, fixing social mistakes
No.
or when you might have done something that could unintentionally threaten someone's face.
Their self-image or standing, right?
Yeah, their self-image. Saying sorry helps restore balance, maintain those positive relationships. It acknowledges you might have messed up or imposed.
Makes sense. And the examples for the textbook for apologizing.
One was quite simple. Someone hears bad news, like someone didn't win a race, and the other person responds, oh, sorry. Even that brief apology, it acknowledges the other person's disappointment, shows a bit of empathy.
Yeah, a small but important moment.
Exactly. The other example was more explicit. I am sorry for underestimating you, Marissa. I should not have pushed you to be a goalkeeper. You are such a great midfielder.
Oh, okay. A direct apology for a past action.
Right. Here, the character Cede is directly apologizing for her previous judgment, which could definitely have hurt Mirza's feelings or confidence. This apology clearly addresses the potential face-threatening act, the underestimation, and tries to repair the interaction.
Okay, so just to sum up what the researchers actually found in this specific English for Nusantara textbook for 8th graders. Out of all the ways you could theoretically express negative politeness, this book focuses mainly on teaching kids how to soften requests with hedging,
Yep. The can I please type things.
how to apologize when needed,
Or the more detailed apologies.
and most prominently, how to show respect through specific address forms that giving deference.
That's the core finding, yes.
And what this shows us, really, is how language education, especially in an English as a foreign language setting like Indonesia, how it adapts these kind of universal linguistic ideas like politeness to fit the local cultural needs.
Exactly. The textbook is prioritizing the politeness strategies that are most relevant, most valuable for students navigating their own social world there, emphasizing respect and harmony.
It's really fascinating how just looking closely at a textbook can give you such a clear picture of the specific communication skills and cultural norms being prioritized.
It is.
It really shows how language learning is so tangled up with social and cultural learning. You can't really separate them.
Indeed. It gives us some pretty concrete evidence of how politeness theory gets put into practice in actual educational materials. And it really highlights how important that cultural adaptation is when you're designing curriculum.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we've explored the pages of English for Nusantara and the politeness strategies it teaches. Let's maybe wrap up our deep dive.
Sounds good. So we've seen that this specific textbook for Indonesian 8th graders really emphasizes three main negative politeness strategies: questioning and hedging, apologizing, and especially giving deference, mainly through those respectful address forms.
Right. And that heavy focus on deference, it really underscores the cultural importance of showing respect for status, for hierarchy, in that particular context.
That seemed to be the big takeaway regarding the why.
And understanding these specific strategies helps students learn really essential skills. How to communicate respectfully, how to navigate social interactions smoothly, places like school and home, and how to build positive relationships, all within that framework of cultural norms that seem to value discretion and respect.
Yeah, it's a really clear example of how textbooks can kind of translate abstract ideas about language into practical, usable lessons that are tailored for a specific group of learners in a specific place.
Bridging theory and practice.
Exactly. And, well, this kind of leaves us with a thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. If a textbook for young learners in one cultural context, like Indonesia, specifically highlights these particular ways of being polite, especially focusing so much on showing deference through address forms, what does that suggest about just the sheer diversity of politeness norms around the world? How many different ways there are to be polite?
That's a great point. How do the politeness strategies you use every day, how you make requests, how you address people, how you apologize, how do those reflect your own cultural background or your relationships or even just your personal style?
Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about the next time you find yourself carefully choosing your words. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.